June 14th, 2023, Broward County Courthouse, Florida, day 3 of a death penalty trial. A 24-year-old sits at the defense table. Long dreadlocks, navy suit, cameras rolling. This isn't just any defendant. This is YNW Melly, a rapper with a Billboard hit and millions of streams. A celebrity facing execution. The courtroom is packed. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the families of 2 young men, Christopher YNW Juvie, Thomas, and Anthony YNW Sachasser Williams, both dead since October 2018. Then something happens that will go viral. Melly closes his eyes, clasps his hands together, appears to pray, then opens his eyes and blows a kiss toward the gallery. The clip racks up over 6 million views. Some call it disrespectful, others say it's mental illness. Some think he's mocking the system. But here's what makes this case more tense. The forensic evidence is overwhelming. The defense's reasonable doubt arguments are compelling, and after weeks of testimony, a jury of 12 will deliberate for 14 hours and still can't agree. 9 vote guilty, 3 refuse to convict, mistrial, a rising rap star, 2 childhood friends murdered, forensic evidence pointing one direction, a defense poking holes everywhere else, and a jury that couldn't decide. This is the YNW Melly case, and to understand why 12 people couldn't reach a verdict, we need to go back to the beginning. Today, we're looking deep into one of the most complex murder trials in recent hip-hop history, a case where the evidence tells 2 completely different stories, where celebrity meets the death penalty, and where justice remains unresolved after nearly 7 years. Before we get into it, if you're interested in true crime cases that go beyond the headlines, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We cover cases with the depth they deserve, forensic evidence, legal analysis, and the human stories behind the courtroom drama. Now let's talk about YNW Melly. Anthony DeAndre Williams was born July 28, 1997 in Miramar, Florida. Stage name, YNW Sachasser. Christopher Jermaine Thomas Jr. was born November 20th, 1998 in Gifford, Florida. Stage name, YNW Juvie. And Jamel Maurice Demons, born May 1st, 1999, also from Gifford, became YNW Melly. Gifford is a small, struggling community near Vero Beach on Florida's Treasure Coast. High poverty, high crime, the kind of place where kids grow up fast or don't grow up at all. YNW stood for Young New Wave, or, depending on who you asked, Young Nigga World. Either way, it was more than a rap collective. It was a brotherhood. 4 friends from the same neighborhood, Melly, Sachasser, Juvie, and Cortland, YNW Bortland Henry. They'd known each other since childhood, made music in makeshift studios, posted tracks on SoundCloud, dreamed of escaping Gifford through rap. By 2018, those dreams were becoming real, especially for Melly. 2017, while locked up on weapons charges, Melly wrote a song called Murder on My Mind. The lyrics were haunting, introspective reflections on a hypothetical killing, guilt bleeding out, consequences piling up. He released it in 2018 after his release. The song exploded. It climbed to number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100. By March 2019, Melly had over 200 million streams on Spotify. He signed with 300 Entertainment, collaborated with Kanye West on Mixed Personalities. His debut mixtape, I Am You, charted on the Billboard 200. Anthony and Christopher were part of that rise. They appeared in music videos, recorded their own tracks. The YNW collective was ascending together. Success for one meant success for all. October 25th, 2018, the 4 friends met at a recording studio in Fort Lauderdale. Just another night making music, working on tracks, building their dream. They were last seen leaving the studio together at 3:20 a.m. on October 26th, 75 minutes. Later, 2 of them would be dead 4:35 a.m. October 26, 2018. A dark Jeep Cherokee pulls up to the emergency entrance of Memorial Hospital Miramar. Cortland Henry YNW Bortland was the one driving. In the back seat were two bodies, Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr., both shot multiple times. Medical staff rush out. Too late, both are pronounced dead on arrival. Melly is in the vehicle, shaken but unharmed. Bortland immediately tells hospital staff and responding officers what happened. They'd been victims of a drive-by shooting. According to Bortland's account, the four friends were driving through Miramar when another vehicle pulled alongside them. Unknown occupants opened fire. Bullets ripped through the Jeep. Schazer and Juvie were hit. Bortland drove straight to the nearest hospital. It was a plausible story. South Florida wasn't a stranger to gun violence. Drive-by shootings happened. Random attacks. Wrong place, wrong time. Police began processing the scene. The Jeep Cherokee was riddled with bullet holes, passenger side, rear panels, windows shattered. Shell casings were found near an intersection on Miramar Parkway. No witnesses came forward. No surveillance cameras captured the alleged attack. The investigation moved slowly but methodically. Meanwhile, the hip-hop community mourned publicly. Melly posted on Instagram, "I lost my two brothers by violence." Fans flooded his comments with condolences. Memorial services were held in Gifford and Fort Pierce. Leandra Phillips buried her 19-year-old son. Christopher Anthony Williams' family in Fort Pierce laid their 21-year-old to rest. The drive-by narrative held. Weeks passed, then months. But behind closed doors, forensic investigators were uncovering a very different story. Crime scene technicians had meticulously processed the Jeep Cherokee in the days following the shooting, and they found something that didn't fit the drive-by narrative at all. One single .40 caliber shell casing inside the vehicle on the left rear passenger floorboard, exactly where Jamel Demons had been sitting. Shell casings eject when a gun is fired. If attackers were shooting into the vehicle from outside, casings would fall on the street, not inside the car. Basic firearms mechanics. The discovery made detectives suspicious. They expanded their search radius. At a different location, Pembroke Road, several miles from the hospital, investigators found 8.40 caliber shell casings. Ballistics testing confirmed all 9 casings came from the same weapon. One gun, 2 locations. But why 2 locations? Why would a drive-by shooting have evidence scattered miles apart? A theory began forming. The shooting didn't happen where Bortland said it did. Someone had staged the scene. Then came the ballistics analysis, and it systematically destroyed the drive-by story. Sergeant Christopher Williams, a firearms expert with the Broward Sheriff's Office, examined the autopsy reports and bullet trajectories. That his findings were definitive. Both victims, Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas, had been shot in the left side of their heads. The bullets traveled left to right. Exit wounds were on the right side. If the shooting had been a drive-by from the passenger side, as Bortland claimed, bullets would have entered from the right and traveled right to left. The trajectory was backwards, completely inconsistent with the story. Sergeant Williams concluded the shots came from inside the vehicle, from the back left seat, where Melly had been sitting. The medical examiner's findings supported this conclusion. Christopher Thomas showed stippling gunpowder residue around his wound, an abrasion ring indicating the gun barrel had made contact with his skin. These are textbook indicators of close-range shooting, not a distant drive-by attack. Blood spatter patterns inside the vehicle told the same story. The distribution and directionality indicated the victims were shot from behind or from the side, inside the vehicle, not through windows by external attackers. Sergeant Williams' expert testimony was unequivocal. Prosecutors built a theory from this mountain of forensic evidence. According to prosecution experts, Jamel Demons shot both friends from the rear driver's side seat. After the shooting, the scene was allegedly staged to look like a drive-by, during which the shooter attempted to remove evidence. However, investigators discovered one spent .40 caliber shell casing that had been overlooked inside the vehicle. It was elaborate, premeditated, but it required answering one critical question. Why would Melly kill his childhood friends? For nearly 4 months, investigators quietly built their case. They re-interviewed Cortland Henry multiple times. His drive-by story showed inconsistencies when pressed on specific details, timing, locations, the sequence of events. Detectives analyzed cell phone data. Geofence technology placed phones at 3 key locations that night: the Fort Lauderdale studio, the Miramar Parkway area, and Pembroke Road, where the extra casings were found. While the data couldn't pinpoint exact positions, it was consistent with the prosecution's staging theory. On February 12, 2019, the Broward County State Attorney's Office charged Jamel Demons and Cortland Henry with 2 counts of first-degree murder with premeditation. They sought the death penalty for both. The next day, February 13, 2019, Melly turned himself in. Bortland was arrested in Texas and extradited to Florida. Before his arrest, Melly posted on Instagram, "To all my fans and supporters, no, I did not get locked up in Washington, but I am turning myself in today. I want you guys to know I love you and appreciate every single one of y'all. A couple months ago, I lost my 2 brothers by violence, and now the system want to find justice." Unfortunately, a lot of rumors and lies are being said, but no worries. God is with me and my brother at YNW.Bortland. And we want y'all to remember it's a YNW family. The public reaction was immediate and massive. Fans were shocked. "Murder on My Mind," the song Melly had written before the killings, suddenly took on darker, more literal meaning. Streams surged. Media outlets dissected every lyric. Both men pleaded not guilty. Their trials would be separated. Melly's would come first. It would be over 4 years before that trial began. The forensic evidence seemed damning. Bullet trajectories, shell casing locations, close-range indicators, blood spatter, expert testimony. But Melly's defense team, led by attorney David Howard, argued the prosecution's theory had critical gaps.
Prosecutors are given great power, endless resources to perform their mission of pursuing justice. But that's not what occurred here. What they will bring you is a case that is riddled with reasonable doubt, that is founded on an incompetent and incomplete investigation.
Then there was DNA evidence, or the suspicious lack of it. Multiple items from the crime scene were tested for Melly's DNA. The rear passenger door handle showed results that may have been Melly's DNA, language suggesting uncertainty, not confirmation, not was, not matched, may have been. More problematic, this DNA test was conducted on June 1st, 2023, just 11 days before trial. The defense hammered this timing relentlessly. Why test this supposedly critical piece of evidence at the absolute last minute? Why not years earlier when the item was first collected in 2018? Most other evidence tested came back negative for Melly's DNA. Gunshot residue tests told a similar story. Melly tested negative for GSR. Cortland Henry tested positive, but that was explained by the prosecution's own theory that Bortland had fired shots into the vehicle during the staging. The defense called only one witness, Adrian Davis, a friend of Melly's. Davis testified that Melly had been at his house the night of the shooting, asleep. He said they learned about the murders together later that morning, that Melly cried when he heard his friends were dead. Prosecutors challenged Davis's credibility. He was a close friend with the obvious bias, but his testimony introduced the possibility of an alibi. If Melly was asleep at Davis's house, he couldn't have been in that Jeep. Then the defense attacked the investigation itself. Attorney David Howard argued detectives had conducted an incompetent and incomplete investigation. They'd developed tunnel vision on Melly from the beginning, failed to pursue alternative leads, lost or mishandled evidence, the cell phone. Data, while suggestive, couldn't pinpoint exact locations, only general areas spanning blocks or miles. The defense even offered an alternative interpretation of the ballistics evidence. While Sergeant Williams testified shots came from the back left seat, the defense suggested the left-to-right trajectory could be explained by the victim's head positions at the moment of impact. If they'd been turning, leaning, or if the vehicle had been at a certain angle during an external attack, the wounds could theoretically still result from a drive-by. It was speculative, yes, but that was the point. Reasonable doubt didn't require proving Melly was innocent. It only required showing the prosecution's theory wasn't the only possible explanation. And then there was the defense's most powerful argument, motive. Why would Melly kill his childhood friends? Prosecutors pointed to text messages from August and September 2018, 2 months before the murders. Messages between Melly and Anthony Williams showing disputes about money, arguments about payments, tension over finances. But were combative texts enough to explain a double execution? The defense emphasized their shared history, years of friendship, a rap collective rising together. Melly's success benefited everyone. Anthony and Christopher were part of the YNW brand. Videos, songs, the collective identity. Killing them made no strategic sense, no financial sense, no emotional sense. The prosecution had forensic evidence showing how the murders happened. The defense had unanswered questions about why they would happen, and a jury would have to decide which mattered more. June 27, 2023, week 2 of the trial. A detective takes the witness stand wearing a black ski mask. Detective Danny Polo specialized in gang investigations for the Broward Sheriff's Office. He'd received death threats related to gang cases. The court permitted him to testify with his identity concealed for safety. His job, establish Melly's alleged connection to the G-Shine Bloods, a subset of the Bloods gang. Prosecutors presented hundreds of photographs, Melly throwing gang signs, posing with known G-Shine members, wearing red clothing associated with Bloods affiliation, text messages peppered with gang terminology, social media posts referencing Bloods culture. Detective Polo testified that based on his expertise, Melly was affiliated with G-Shine Bloods. The prosecution's theory, the murders were gang-related, but the defense systematically dismantled this theory. Attorney David Howard's cross-examination was surgical. He argued that being photographed with gang members didn't make someone a gang member. Growing up in Gifford, a community with significant gang presence, meant exposure was inevitable, unavoidable. More importantly, the defense argued gangs recruit rappers, not the other way around. When a local kid gets famous, gangs want association. It brings money, legitimacy, street credibility, protection. Melly wasn't recruiting for G-Shine Bloods, they were recruiting him for his fame and income. Being recruited doesn't equal membership. And then the defense pointed out what the prosecution never established. How did killing Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas benefit any gang? The prosecution never explained what gang objective was served by these murders. There was no testimony suggesting the victims were rival gang members, no evidence they'd violated gang codes, no indication they posed a threat to G-Shine operations, no power struggle, no territorial dispute, nothing. Detective Polo could testify about gang affiliation all day, but affiliation without motive wasn't evidence of murder, it was just association, context without causation. The jury was left to fill in that gap themselves. Some might see gang connections as explanation enough. Gang members kill, that's what they do. Others would see it as circumstantial association without any logical link to why these specific murders happened. It was one more contradiction for them to resolve. Beyond the evidence, something else was happening in that courtroom, something that would divide public opinion and enrage the victims' families, Melly's behavior. On day 1 of the trial, June 12, 2023, when prosecutors played surveillance footage of the hospital showing Sakchazer and Juvie's bodies being wheeled away on stretchers, Melly appeared to wipe his eyes, emotional, visibly affected. 4 of the victims' family members walked out of the courtroom in tears. Melly seemed to be mourning his friends. But then on other days, different behavior emerged. Melly smiled frequently, laughed with his attorneys, appeared confident, almost casual. The families watching from the gallery were disturbed. This was a death penalty trial for the murder of his best friends, and he looked unbothered. Then came day 3, June 14th, 2023, Melly closed his eyes, clasped his hands together, appeared to pray quietly, then opened his eyes and blew a kiss toward the courtroom gallery. The moment was captured on camera. It went viral. Over 6 million views. Leandra Phillips, Christopher Thomas Jr.'s mother, walked out immediately. In an interview with NBC6, she didn't hold back. Christopher's aunt, Ashley Phillips, also spoke to reporters. She emphasized that Melly was someone they knew, loved, and trusted, someone they'd watched grow up with Christopher. The betrayal was profound. This is somebody that we knew. It's somebody that we loved. It's somebody that we trusted. Like we watched him grow up. So this is a sad case. This is tragic. So we just praying for justice. The internet exploded. Some called Melly demonic. Others suggested mental illness. Some defended him, claiming he had ADHD and was being misrepresented. But inside that courtroom, to the families of two dead young men, it looked like disrespect, like someone who didn't grasp or didn't care about the gravity of what he was accused of. In the prosecution's narrative, perhaps the most damning piece of evidence wasn't forensic, it was digital. 3 words allegedly typed by Melly himself. An Instagram direct message. Sent sometime after the murders, a friend had reached out to Melly asking how he was doing following the deaths of Anthony and Christopher. According to prosecutors, Melly's response was, "Shh, I did that." In court, prosecutors presented this as a direct confession. I did that. Did what? The murders? The message was displayed on large courtroom monitors. Dramatic, damning. It seemed like a smoking gun. But the defense challenged every aspect of this so-called confession. First, ownership. Whose phone sent that message? The defense argued the YNW collective shared devices. Multiple people had access to Instagram accounts, especially Melly's, which was managed by various members of his team. Without forensic proof, the message came from a device in Melly's physical possession at that specific moment. Attribution was questionable. Second, context. I did that could mean almost anything. I posted a tribute to them. I wrote a song about the son. I handled the funeral arrangements. I'm dealing with it emotionally. 3 words without surrounding conversation. No clarifying follow-up. No context showing what that referred to. Third, authentication. The person who allegedly received this message never testified. There was no sworn statement from the recipient verifying what was asked, what the conversation was about, or what Melly supposedly meant. The evidence consisted of screenshots, no metadata, no device forensics, no chain of custody for the original phone. The prosecution argued these were technicalities. Common sense, I did that in the context of 2 murders meant exactly what it sounded like. The defense argued these weren't technicalities. They were fundamental requirements of evidence. A decontextualized screenshot wasn't a confession. It was digital hearsay without proper foundation. For some jurors, 3 words would be enough to convict. For others, 3 words without context, authentication, or corroboration would be insufficient to send a man to death row. Another piece of evidence. Another interpretation, another contradiction. June 12, 2023, nearly 5 years after Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas were killed, their accused murderer finally went to trial. The stakes had never been higher for any Florida defendant. The state had recently changed its death penalty law following the Parkland school shooting case. Previously, a death sentence required a unanimous jury recommendation. Now, under the revised statute, only 8 out of 12 jurors needed to recommend death. Melly faced the possibility of execution with a lower threshold than any capital defendant in modern Florida history. He would be the first tried under this new law.
You got competent lawyers here. I mean, you've seen them perform here. You've discussed things with them, I assume, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that you have a right to testify, and you also have a right not to testify. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
You understand that if you do testify, I'm going to instruct the jury that they have to consider your testimony as they would any other witness. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
And if you don't testify, I'm going to instruct the jury that you have a right not to testify, and they can't consider that, hold that against you. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So my question, I guess, is did you have enough time to talk about this issue about you testifying or not testifying? Did you have enough time to discuss that with your attorneys?
Yes, sir.
For weeks, testimony unfolded. The courtroom was packed daily. Media coverage was relentless. Sergeant Christopher Williams presented his ballistics analysis. The medical examiner walked through autopsy findings carefully, clinically. Detective Danny Polo testified about gang affiliations from behind his ski mask. FBI analysts explained geofence cell phone data. DNA technicians described testing protocols and timing issues. Adrian Davis provided the alibi testimony. Leandra Phillips, Christopher Thomas Jr.'s mother, sat in the courtroom nearly every day. She'd already buried her 19-year-old son. Now she watched as prosecutors tried to prove his best friend had murdered him. The defense called only Adrian Davis, then rested. Their strategy was clear. Don't build an alternative narrative. Attack the prosecution's case. Force the state to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Let the contradictions speak for themselves. Closing arguments came in mid-July. The prosecution summarized, forensic evidence overwhelming. Trajectory analysis placed Melly as shooter. Staging indicated premeditation. Instagram message showed consciousness of guilt. Gang affiliation provided motive context. The defense countered no murder weapon, no clear motive, weak DNA evidence conducted suspiciously late, flawed investigation with tunnel vision, reasonable doubt at every turn. July 22nd, 2023. The jury received the case and began deliberations. Hours passed. Then a full day, multiple days. The jury sent notes to Judge John Murphy. They were struggling, deadlocked on the first-degree murder charges. The judge instructed them to consider lesser included offenses. Second-degree murder, manslaughter, keep deliberating, try harder. They deliberated for a total of 14 hours across multiple days. Finally, another note arrived. Still deadlocked, cannot reach unanimous verdict. Judge Murphy called them back into the courtroom. After polling each juror individually, confirming no amount of additional time would change the outcome, he declared a mistrial.
I'm going to just declare a mistrial.
According to an anonymous juror who later spoke to Local 10 News, the final vote was 9 guilty, 3 not guilty, but even those 9 weren't voting for first-degree murder. They'd compromised down to manslaughter, the lesser charge. The juror described deliberations as tense. One explosive holdout had influenced 2 others to change their votes during discussions. What had initially been leaning toward conviction crumbled under the weight of unresolved questions about motive, the missing weapon, and investigative flaws. No verdict, no closure, no resolution for anyone. Melly returned to Broward County Jail. The families of Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas returned home with their grief unresolved, and prosecutors prepared to try the case again. As we record this in early 2026, Jamel Demons has been incarcerated for over 2,373 days, more than 6.5 years, without a conviction. The case has taken multiple turns since the mistrial. In October 2023, prosecutors filed additional witness tampering and gang-related charges against Melly. Those charges hung over his head for over 2 years. Then on January 20th, 2026, just 1 day before a separate trial for those charges was set to begin, Broward County prosecutors dropped them entirely. The double murder retrial has been delayed repeatedly. Originally discussed for September 2025, the 4th District Court of Appeals intervened, citing ongoing disputes over evidence admissibility. The current scheduled start date, January 6, 2026. If that date holds, Melly will have been in custody for nearly 8 years before his retrial even begins. Meanwhile, his co-defendant took a different path. Cortland Y.N.W. Bortlin Henry was arrested the same day as Melly. February 13th, 2019. He was initially arrested in Texas and extradited to Florida. Unlike Melly, Bortlin was released on bond in June 2020, but he violated his house arrest conditions in April 2021 by visiting strip clubs while wearing an ankle monitor. He was re-arrested. In October 2023, Bortlin was arrested again on witness tampering charges following a home raid. Then, on September 16, 2025, Bortlin accepted a plea deal. He pleaded no contest to 2 counts of accessory after the fact and witness tampering charges. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the 2 first-degree murder charges against him. The judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison with 6 years of supervised release afterward. With credit for time served, his release date is less than 6 years away. He avoided what could have been multiple life sentences, and crucially, as part of his agreement, Bortlin must cooperate with prosecutors by answering questions in the future. Whether that includes testifying against Melly at the retrial remains unclear. The death penalty remains on the table for Melly. The same forensic evidence will be presented, the same contradictions will emerge, but potentially with one major difference. His co-defendant, the man who drove to the hospital and told the drive-by story, might now testify for the prosecution. A new jury will face questions the first jury couldn't answer. What evidence couldn't convince 3 jurors? 12 people heard every piece of evidence. They saw the ballistics reports showing left-to-right trajectories, the shell casing on the left rear floorboard, the close-range stippling, the blood spatter patterns. They heard Sergeant Williams say definitively, this was not a drive-by shooting. They also heard about the missing murder weapon, the DNA tested suspiciously late that may have been Melly's, the alibi witness, the lack of clear motive beyond vague money disputes, the incompetent and incomplete investigation. And they saw an Instagram message, 3 words, without context, presented as a confession. 9 jurors thought the evidence proved manslaughter, not first-degree murder, not premeditated execution, but manslaughter, a killing without planning. 3 jurors said even that wasn't proven beyond reasonable doubt. Why did Leandra Phillips have to walk out of a courtroom because the man accused of murdering her son was smiling and blowing kisses? Why did Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr., 2 aspiring rappers with their whole lives ahead of them, end up dead in the back of a Jeep? If Melly did it, what was the real motive? Was it money? Gang initiation? Something else entirely? If he didn't do it, who killed his childhood friends? And why did all the forensic evidence point directly at him? Leandra Phillips continues to attend court proceedings seeking justice for Christopher. The Williams family waits for answers that forensic science alone hasn't provided. January 6, 2027. A new jury will be seated. New voir dire. New opening statements. The same evidence will be presented again. The same contradictions will need resolving. Sometimes justice is measured not in verdicts, but in unanswered questions that refuse to resolve. On Melly's fate and the truth about what happened on October 26, 2018 remains unresolved. This case is far from over. The retrial in January 2027 could finally provide answers or create even more questions. If you want to stay updated on the YNW Melly retrial and other complex true crime cases, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We'll be covering the retrial as it unfolds with the same depth and forensic detail you just watched. Drop a comment below. Do you think the forensic evidence is enough to convict, or does the defense's reasonable doubt argument hold up? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.